Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the EFL Fantasy Podcast. My name is Angus,
And my name is Dan.
and we're here to review the big double, game week 20. As you can see or hear, depending on how you consume the podcast, Jamie's not with us this evening. He's got parenting duties, so we'll let him off. But yeah, Dan, how are you?
Yeah, all good. Follow the leader was really fun, especially in a double game week. Um, we'll also get on to the Luton and the Jones thing when we're talking about them. So it's been quite an eventful few weeks. Um, shall I go through my team quickly then,
Yeah,
Angus?
go for it.
We got the same
Yeah,
team,
we've got the same
so
team, so
exactly the same team. Um, so I scored 204 points. Obviously, played follow the leader. Which was a green arrow. I'm now up to 76, so I finally got into the top 100, which it's basically been 2 seasons, to be honest, since season one. So I captained Watford, so Sarr, vice captain, chair, QPR, and put the emergency on and NDI. So obviously Sheffield United. Um, so Sarr got 20, Pedro 38, and Kamara 6. Uh, QPR options, Chair got 22, Dykes got 13, Powell got 10, and the emergency with what way to start it. Not didn't finish great, but emergency at NDI 13, McBurney 33, and Armehodvich 24. And my two other players was Wilson in goal for 11 and Bree for 14. So, like I said, about a 44 place green arrow up to 76.
yeah, as you said, I had exactly the same team with exactly the same armbands. So 204 points as well. I had an 11 place green arrow up to 11th. So just hovering outside the top 10 now, but pretty pleased with where I'm positioned at this point in time. Obviously have to be pretty pleased with that, really. But yeah, I'll briefly cover the pod team. We managed to play follow the leader and have a red arrow. The great thing for us was rather than buy a third Middlesbrough player, we sold Jones and Giles. Which I still think was right in theory because we've got a QPR defender in Ahmed so it's not as bad as it first seems because otherwise we wouldn't have had Ahmed and his sort of 24 on it. But sort of looking back, if we just bought Akpom instead of selling both of them, obviously it would have been much better. We did have the best score in the Thursday Night Wars, so that's the important part. I think we narrowly beat out the community team. We played triple. We had a triple up captaincy of Sarr, Sema, and Kamara, vice captaincy of Chair, Dykes, and Laird. The emergency on Ndiaye, McBurney, and Ahmed we had Johansson and Bree as the other two. We had Viktor on the bench, which is obviously annoying, but we had sort of a Bree or Viktor selection dilemma, which I still think we made the right call. It just, I mean, if Viktor hadn't scored a 95th minute winner on Tuesday, we would have been fine. But yeah, Red Arrow, that team is 295th now. So, but like I said, another win in Thursday Night Wars, which is what really matters for that team. So all positive there. So we'll move on to sort of reviewing the game week. So how we're going to go about this for this game week is we're going to run through sort of the doubling teams and how they did. And so we'll cover the single game week teams that played those teams as we sort of run through them. So the first team we're going to look at is Sheffield United. So obviously they had the big 5-2 win against Burnley in the Saturday lunchtime kickoff. and then a bizarre 1-0 defeat to Rotherham. So Dan kicks off on talking about sort of Sheffield United.
If there's any two sets of games that sums out the championship, this was it right here. I thought the Sheffield United Burnley game was just a really good game
Yeah,
between what I thought was and still think are the two best teams in the league. Um, it's funny we went into this double thinking, well, if they can get as many points in the Burnley game, and then they've got Rotherham, because we'd be all right. But it was just end to end pretty much. The key factor in this game was Burnley just couldn't cope with Sheffield United from set pieces. It was at some points it was like kids football. Just Burnley just could not defend against Sheffield United. McBurney, I think he got 2 goals and an assist. Um, and Anil got a goal and assist, and
yeah.
Ndi I think just got a goal. So all the key players got this like scored and assisted each other. It was just really great. And for someone who basically I only picked him because I already had 2 of them. Um, yeah, that turned out quite well. Um, I'm not sure we learnt too much from the games. Like they pretty much played the lineup you'd think they did. They were even unchanged for the second game, where I thought McBurney was going to get rested with his hernia problem. He didn't, and well, you watched the game, Angus. So I don't know if maybe you want to talk about the Rotherham performances. I was having to watch Luton lose to Stoke.
So it was a very strange game. It's a very bitty game for a lot of it. Sheffield United really struggled to get any rhythm going. It was also weird because there were multiple sort of stoppages for multiple minutes in the first half, which created sort of a bit of a weird setup. But yeah, they never quite got going. The set piece deliveries, which were so good against Burnley, were terrible against Rotherham. Um, and they didn't work Johansson anywhere near enough, which particularly for him, I mean, we'll come to Rotherham later in more depth, where he'd had back-to-back games where he'd had sort of errors that cost them goals, or where he could have done better and cost them goals. How little they worked him was a concern. Even Ahmedhodzic coming off before he could get the second half clean sheet in that game was just the icing on top of a disappointing game. But yeah, like you said, I think it's strange because we look at their points from the game week, and it's about what we would have hoped for. Almost if sort of like being optimistic, it's like, yeah, I'd really like this. It's just come sort of the wrong way around, which particularly with the Rotherham game second, then feels slightly disappointing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have too much concern. There's the ongoing McBurney thing, and he looked to be struggling a little bit late in the Rotherham game, which might be a concern for some people. Obviously, he played sort of, I think it was about 80 minutes in the Burnley game, and then ended up playing the full 90 against Rotherham. Ahmedhodzic was fine. I wouldn't, unless we get sort of particular injury news, I wouldn't read anything into him coming off sort of early-ish. I think it was just sort of changing things. But yeah, I mean, generally, sort of like obviously after the great performance at the weekend, sort of a bit of disappointment there. And I mean, both games, I think the other thing to say, I don't think he did come on, at least not for any meaningful time against Burnley, but also particularly in the Rotherham game. The concern for Sheffield United would be they look markedly worse when Billy Sharp comes on the pitch.
47-year-old Billy Sharp.
The sort of link-up play is worse. He's not linking up right. He was getting caught offside multiple times in sort of silly ways. Um, so, fortunately for them, McBurney's going to have this surgery, which you're not necessarily going to want to rely on him to play every game, but should make him less of a concern in terms of the getting through multiple games in a week after he's had it. But
Do you know, Angus? Obviously, there is a break, but it's not as long as the Premier League. Will his surgery mean he will miss games afterwards, or will he be?
so they're expecting him to be back ready before the resumption.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think it's not literally, but I think it's one of these things where he sort of has to sit and rest it after the surgery for a couple of weeks, and then he can sort of be back in action. Um,
Yeah.
they certainly haven't sounded concerned about his timeline for return in any way, so it might be a concern for this weekend. Um,
Yeah. You have to think he ain't playing if he's done 80 and 90.
yeah, and he was struggling at the end of that Rotherham game. There were multiple times where he was sort of down and looked to be moving worse. So he might be a concern for this weekend, but otherwise, I wouldn't be too concerned about that, and I wouldn't really be concerned about them. It just seemed to be a bad night. Um, but yeah, that's sort of the Sheffield United Rotherham game, and Sheffield United on a whole. Good game week if you owned them. Mixed game week if you support them. But we'll move on to the next team, which was Watford.
Are we going to
So,
mention Burnley quickly?
oh yeah, so we'll touch on Burnley. So obviously they just had the. It was a bad game for them. Um,
Very.
yeah. Both goals with a handy helping hand from Jack Robinson, who was the one person I didn't mention. He did get a goal, but he was a liability at the back in that game. Um, Heading in Benson's shot that was going straight to Fotheringham if he just left it, and then just gifting the ball to Benson. Obviously, I think they look better whenever Benson starts. Um, Brownhill was suspended for that game. I think it makes a big difference when he's out. And the key thing for them as well is Cullen was back, which were with Cork having served his suspension before that as well, will free up Brownhill to play in the advanced role again. So obviously that's handy for anyone who held him through. Rodriguez, I think it was a minor injury issue. I haven't seen whether he'll be back for the weekend, but obviously that sort of affects things. Um, Although against teams that aren't Sheffield United and the way they set up defensively, I'm not sure Teller up front is the worst thing if they have to do it for another game. Because I do think there's a lot of sort of dynamism in that attack if they have sort of Benson, Zaruri, and Teller as the attack again. But yeah, just a bad day for them really. And I think Company said as much. There were a few key moments at the back where they were just really sloppy. They didn't defend the set piece as well, which will be a concern for them. But we'll see. But that's the main thing on them. I think is Brownhill will resume in the 10, and yeah, was it Vitinho and Matson at the fullbacks this time?
I'm just staying away from them.
Yeah, I think it's tough with
There's no
them at the
need to go
moment.
there.
Um, I wouldn't be looking too hard, although if you're on one of them, I'd probably hold them. The one I'd be most likely to sell is Roberts at this point. So we'll move on to Watford. So obviously a bit of a strange game week for them. They lost at home 1-0 to Coventry and then beat Reading 2-0 on Tuesday. So Dan, I'll talk about the Reading game because that was the other game that I watched on Tuesday. But if you want to kick us off on the Coventry game for them.
Yeah, it's just Watford, isn't it? They're very unpredictable. We've mentioned about this before. The reason why I and a lot of people made them the captain team was because of the upside,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure we definitely didn't get it in in the Coventry game. They didn't score, but the main news was Davis was back up front, which is funny because if I'd have known he was going to be back, I'd have picked Davis over Pedro. So I'm glad I didn't know that. And then you also had the Kamara incident where he got booked. So he never actually played the second game. That's probably the main news. You did have Sarr missing a glorious chance
from what would have been a Kamara assist.
from exactly, which would have been mega points for pretty much it. I think Watford were probably the most owned team, or definitely captained. I'd have thought. I don't know the figures, but I'm pretty sure they would have been. There's not much more with Watford in that game. They underperformed really.
Yeah, I think they had the chances to win the game or to at least get something from the game. And like you said, that Sarr chance in particular, which obviously, like you say, Sarr from Kamara about 2 yards out. How almost he manages to pick it up over the bar from about 2 yards out is almost more impressive than if they'd scored the goals. The fact that he's managed to get it up and over the bar from like 2 yards out is the most impressive part. But yeah, unfortunate in that one, I think. That's the main thing. It didn't quite go their way. It was a pretty even game. I think a draw probably would have been a fair outcome. And then the Reading game, I was quite sort of impressed with them in the Reading game. I think it sounded like they'd had a sort of kick up the arse from Bilic. Sort of get your acting gear. Particularly what you're talking about with the consistency. I think he said sort of the results might not always be there, but he wants to see a consistent level of effort and performance. And they were in control from the outset in the Reading game. They had to make a couple of changes. Sema went to left back because Kamara was suspended. It's quite funny that particularly if you look at Gaffr, they only had 2 defenders because Dan Gosling played right back. And they played. I'm trying to remember. I think they brought Asprilla in. I've already forgotten.
Yeah, Sprilla came in.
And they sort of played him with Pedro and Sarr behind Davis. And yeah, they were just in control. Pedro obviously got the penalty. I would say he won the penalty, but I feel like saying Oviajaria gave him the penalty. Just pulled him down for no reason whatsoever. Like he had his back to goal, and Ajaria just pulls him over. Absolutely ridiculous. And I'm not sure whether Pedro was supposed to be the penalty taker. There were a couple of comments from Bilic after the game that suggested maybe he wasn't supposed to be. But he said something about how he doesn't like to take the opportunities away from a player who's like confident. So Pedro took the penalty, slotted it away very nicely, sent the keeper the wrong way. They struggled to get the second goal. They had most of the game, but they struggled to actually get the second goal. And then Pedro got it late on. Sarr with a crossover. Buzanis, who had to come on for Lumley, who got injured, making a save actually to deny Davis. Could only tip it away, but just happened to go straight to Pedro, who was able to finish it. So a good second game, particularly if you owned Pedro. Sarr, I don't think he added much by way of points in that second game.
Sarr was probably a disappointment over the 2 games.
Yeah, he was a disappointment over the 2 games in terms of the points you would have wanted, and he's a disappointment over the 2 games in terms of when you see him in those positions. Like we talk about the shot against Coventry, but you see him getting into those positions, into those situations, and not coming away with points. That feels a bit disappointing as well. Kamara, we've talked about. He got into what was it, the 83rd minute, before he got booked. But yeah, I'm not, completely committed one way or the other on Kamara.
I think you can get rid of Kamara.
Yeah,
I
I
think there's
wouldn't be
way
worried
better
about.
options.
I wouldn't be rushing to get rid of Sarr or Pedro at this point if you've got them. They're two of the best players in this division, and it's a lot of budget to tie up, which is the one thing where you might have to balance out your picks elsewhere. But I wouldn't be rushing to drop down to one of them necessarily or something like that. It's certainly not something that's crossed my mind. I'd rather move things around elsewhere than right now than get rid of one of them.
Well, especially they got Bristol City.
Yeah, I
I'm not
mean,
getting rid of any attacking players against Bristol City.
no, you really can't. We don't need to talk about their opponents because we'll come to both of them later. I guess the other thing is congratulations to those who went Backman over Kamara. I think you've net sort of won. But yeah, that's the only other thing I could think of. So we'll move on to the next team, which is QPR. So obviously they, I've lost my results page. They lost at home 1-0 to West Brom and then lost at home 2-1 to Huddersfield. Not sure we saw those coming. Dan, kick us off talking about QPR.
Yeah, as you mentioned, two losses. I sort of could see the West Brom game coming, just because we know the talent in the West Brom squad, and QPR haven't been on great form really.
What is it? No win in 4 since Beale turned down
No,
Wolves.
I think the Wigan was
I saw. I think it's
was included
one
there.
draw and 3 defeats since he officially turned down Wolves.
Yeah, and both the Birmingham and the Birmingham and the Norwich games were on TV, and they shouldn't have lost to Norwich, and they did lose to Birmingham. So
Yeah.
I think the West Brom game, Corberan has gone in there and has sorted them out defensively, which was probably bad news for QPR because, like we mentioned, West Brom are pretty decent player-wise. But yeah, the main news was Willock back in the lineup, and he started both games, which I was a bit surprising. I
I
thought
was
we
for
might have
that.
got the start against West Brom and maybe he'd got 30 minutes against Huddersfield, but he did start both games. Chair didn't really do anything apart from what he does, which is pick up bonus points. To finish on 22 points and get 7 bonus
Yeah.
points when you haven't really done anything in the game just shows how good he is. Powell got a couple of clean sheets, but didn't offer too much. And do you know what? I think Dyke scored, was it first or second minute in against Huddersfield? And I was like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
I was expecting like a high scoring game, and it never really happened. So I think QPR were a disappointment. Vice captain team this week, and I think a lot of them would have been vice captain or captain for a lot of people. Going forward, I think Dyke's going forward. I'll get off him. Um, Powell, I'll probably keep a while. Probably got other transfers I want to do. And Chair's probably the best midfielder in the game, so he's staying.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the big thing. You look across the two games. The one thing which concerns me slightly, owning a defender, is it seems they have a set piece issue. It seems they're
Yeah,
another team potentially with a set piece issue. I think they conceded set piece goals in both games. Obviously, one of them is a bit more dramatic in terms of being half cleared and then ruffles with a sort of ridiculous sort of overhead, hooked,
I was going to mention
dinked
that in the
finish.
Huddersfield game.
But I think that's the slight concern for them. I think that's a few games now. I think they had something similar in the Birmingham game as well. So I think that will be a concern for them. Like you say, Willock starting both was big for them. Particularly now he'll have the international break to sort of get some conditioning back as well. Because I don't think he'd had much. Well, he'd had bits and pieces of training. I think I'm not sure how much training he'd had before his first appearance back, but he'd be able to sort of get a full conditioning sort of regime in over the break. Chair walks onto the pitch, gets bonus. Like
7
Dykes,
points.
he's done his bit in terms of getting a goal, but they were probably the most underwhelming one this game week, particularly among the sort of highly owned doubling teams. I think QPR were the most underwhelming. I think probably the best ones that came out of it were the ones on Powell, Chair and Willock, but I think it's close between sort of Powell, Chair and Willock and Powell, Chair and Dykes. So you're probably potentially looking to move on one, maybe two after this, but it's not sort of too dramatic with them, and it's not too sort of necessary given their prices. You're not necessarily having to sort of ship the money elsewhere.
So away to Coventry, 21.
Yeah, it's not the best fixture, not the worst fixture. You're not sort of desperate to have them for it, but you're not desperate to get rid of them before it either.
Yeah.
So the other team to cover, unless you've got anything else particularly to add on the QPR side of this, is West Brom. So we'll just talk about West Brom briefly. Corberan is clearly sort of like, I remember seeing them in the first game when he'd been in for like 2 days, and you sort of thought, oh, Corberan's got a lot of work to do here. It seems like he's been doing a lot of that work. You can see it sort of paying off already. And I think that's big for them. Especially now he'll have a break with the majority of the team to work with them. Because we know he likes to drill fitness levels. Obviously, he's worked previously with Marcelo Bielsa, who was massive, obviously, in like fitness levels and sort of weight and all that sort of thing. So I sense it will be quite a tough break for the West Brom players, but I think they'll probably be better for it on the other side.
So I know we're not going to bring probably anyone in for West Brom before the international break, but we know with Corberan, he was very good defensively.
Yeah.
So maybe defensively they become options. And then we also know that they were very good at from set pieces, and they've got Jed Wallace, they've got Swift.
I think it was Swift's delivery that Bartley headed home against QPR.
Yeah. So you think he might start off with maybe low margin games, but if they start becoming very good defensively, those attacking players are then going to get more options going forward.
Yeah.
You'd like to think.
2 other things to mention on them, I think. One, they do have the double in game week 23, which will be something to think about after the break. It's not long after the break until they have a double. And the other thing, just to mention, Daryl DK basically forgot he existed. He got 45 minutes for the under-21s this week and did score a goal in that game. So particularly potentially being able to work with Corberan over the break, particularly to build up sort of that fitness level and integrate him back in could be big for them, because we know what he's capable of in this division.
I picked him to be top goal scorer in the predictions We did at the start of the season.
So that's the other one to mention there. We'll move on to Coventry. So they obviously they had the 1-0 win against Watford, and they beat Wigan 2-0. So I mean the big thing for them, particularly in the Watford game, particularly for assets that were chosen, was that neither Bidwell nor O'Hare started, who were quite popular ones for people on Follow the Leader. I think that was just a fixture congestion thing, particularly as Bidwell had been suffering with the illness that had been sort of ripping through Coventry. But of course, in each of the games, Viktor gets a goal. He keeps, it won't necessarily be spectacular, but it'll keep getting them. And obviously, the goal, I'm sure a lot of people have seen it doing the rounds on Twitter. The goal against Wigan is obviously very good, where he runs like half the field. And that's right at the end of the game, which was obviously a killer for us, those of us who didn't own or weren't on Coventry for the triple. Him sort of bagging that right at the death. But I think all in all, it's probably quite a pleasing. I mean, it was a very pleasing double for Coventry with the 2 wins. It's probably quite a pleasing double for those who were on Coventry. Wilson, 2 clean sheets. Viktor, the 2 goals. I saw a few people around who'd gone someone like Harmer, who obviously got a goal in the second game. That's gone well. If you had one of the defenders, you may well have been a bit unlucky, particularly if you had someone like Bidwell. But if you had someone like sort of Panzo or McFadzean, you're probably pretty happy coming out of that, particularly given the points for some of the other players on some of the other teams. I think, we always thought, particularly aside from Viktor, that Coventry were probably going to be a solid option for this week. But if you were looking for upside, it wasn't necessarily going to be there. And that's basically how it's played out for the most part. That's sort of my take on them. I also think if you've got them, you won't be rushing to sell, particularly because the other doubles, the other double in the near future they've got coming. I don't know what your thoughts are on Coventry.
I just want to mention that they're actually quite good defensively.
Yeah.
They win a lot of games to 0, and I think it might have been going under a bit of the radar. I don't have the exact stats, but I'm pretty sure they've won a lot of games 1-0 or 2-0 recently. So whereas at the start they were a team to target, they're clearly not that anymore. I've got Wilson. I've got so many doubles that he'll be in the team.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's the worst option. Maybe trying to get a defender. I think Dabo's injured. Bidwell never convinced, but it might not be a terrible option to get a defender. Although by the time the doubles, you'd like to think O'Hare's fully fit and raring to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have mentioned their defensive record before, but it certainly it is worth sort of mentioning again because they have been very good defensively, particularly in terms of sort of the numbers. And so, yeah, I totally, those who have defenders, you're not going to be rushing to sell them, whether that's the keeper or actual defenders. But you may want to be looking, if you've also got Viktor, at how you get to someone like O'Hare instead, potentially. But yeah, I don't have much else to add on them. So we'll move on to our next team, which is Luton. So Luton beat Blackpool 1-0 and then lost the Nathan Jones derby away at Stoke.
Which might include another team. See.
Yes, but Dan, talk to us about Luton this game week.
it's going to be tricky, especially to talk about the Stoke game. This game, um, we played five at the back. The main news was Clark played right wing back. Um, we then started the game and Potts got injured, and I know a few people were on Potts. So we then actually played four at the back. So James Bree played centre back for the rest of the game, and we went 4-3-3. Um, Berry scored a Luke Berry goal where it's just a really good reactionary goal, either a knockdown or first time shot or anything like that. And Blackpool, I thought, were quite good. Probably should have been a draw, but they missed a couple of chances. We were blocking everything. Horvath made a couple of saves. Um, so option wise, obviously Bree got the clean sheet bonus like he normally does, and I think Morris got top bonus in this.
I think,
I'm,
yeah,
I'm
he
not
did,
quite
yeah.
I'm not quite sure how he done it. I think he done a few dribbles. He takes numerous shots, so things like that. Um, Second game, obviously between then, the news broke about Nathan Jones. So Nathan Jones took charge of the Stoke game, which I'm not quite sure why he took charge of it. I'm not a fan of it. A lot of fans weren't a fan of it, but well, we sort of changed halfway through. So we played three at the back. Osho came back in. We started with Bree centre back and Clark right wing back. Um, it was sort of a 3-4-3, but at times Cornet was dropping into the hole. Um, and we basically got done twice in the first 15 minutes from crosses, which was their only attacks. Um, and it was a bit sloppy from us. And then it was pretty much all us for the rest of the game. We had the better chances. Morris basically missed a chance from about 6 yards out, hit it straight at the goalie. Lockyer hit the post. We had a couple of other things. So overall, draw would have probably been a fair result, but you go 2-0 down, it's always going to be uphill from there. Also, Horvath missed the game through illness. I saw a few options of him. Eister started. Morris got booked. I'm not sure if the suspensions
The
are over yet.
bookings had reset
Okay.
between the two games, so he's fine now.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really hard to judge that second game because Jones shouldn't have been there. We're still missing centre backs. We didn't play that badly, to be fair. It was just sort of got done twice in the first 20 minutes and then couldn't score. So
Yeah, I
the
mean,
main news
that
the main
that's
news
sort of,
is who's going to replace him.
yeah, I mean that's going to be the big thing that I'm sure we'll cover is sort of the managerial change at Luton, the potential impact that might have on the team, the lineup, etc. But we'll cover that sort of when it happens. Yeah, I mean it feels a bit sort of unfortunate for some people in terms of the Luton assets, particularly if they were on sort of Potts, who obviously went off injured early in the first game,
Horvath.
didn't play the second game. If you had Horvath, but
If you benched Bell when you picked him, Jamie.
yeah, that was a particularly special one. And for anyone who asks Jamie for advice, just remember that he bought Bell specifically for Follow the Leader and benched him, and didn't realise until after the deadline, having even posted his team. Um, but yeah, obviously Potts with the early injury. I think the most successful people were probably those on Bree, Bell, and Morris. I wouldn't be too sort of stressed out about the sort of performance across the two, like you say. Got the result against Blackpool, even if there was some incredible last-ditch defending going on at times. And from all I've heard, the Stoke game wasn't as bad as the result, so there's that too.
And like, if you've got Bree, keep him, and Morris, I'd keep. We've got Rotherham this week, so it's not a team you're selling your assets for. And then we'll see what the break holds for manager wise. I'll be very surprised if we deviate too far away with um, maybe style might change a bit, but I don't think it'll be drastic changes.
No, and that's the thing that I can't see too much changing, particularly not this weekend, which a lot of people will be thinking about.
Yeah, it'll probably be Big Mick taking charge, I'm guessing.
If there's one way to sort of get the fans back in a positive mood, it's put him in charge for the game.
Yeah,
Saviour. Yeah, but move on to our next team, which is Middlesbrough. Probably the best team for people to have had this week. They had a 1-1 draw against Bristol City, which doesn't look that good on the face of it, but there were points in there for sort of Jones and Akpom, of course, and then the big 3-0 win against Blackpool. But yeah, the big winners this week, those who were on Jones, Giles, and Akpom. The Chuba Akpom renaissance continues. Jones, right mid, continues to be immensely productive. Giles on the set pieces, a lot of the set pieces, meaning he still has the opportunity for returns. Fours in the second game, got an assist, and I think he won and scored a penalty. There seems to be it seems to have been a real jump since Carrick took charge in terms. You can see some of the changes that he's bringing in. I think compared to previously, their sort of average amount of possession in a game has jumped by over 10%. So that's obviously that's obviously a trend you can spot immediately. Their average possession previously was below 50%. I think it's now just over 60. So you can see the stylistic differences. This sort of 4-4-2, or with Akpom sort of playing almost behind fours, is working quite well for them. And yeah, I think like I said, I think that those on Middlesbrough will sort of feel like the real winners this game week. I don't know what else you have to add on them, Dan.
Probably Giles is probably going to be a must pick. Jones is going to be a must pick if he's playing right wing and going to get clean sheet points. You're going to have to get on him because he's going to get bonus for dribbling and things like that.
Dribbling, shots on target, all that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we got Norwich, which Norwich ain't been too great, and then they've got Luton. Was it Burnley? And
then they play Wigan.
Wigan, yeah. So it's a pretty much mixed, but for someone like Jones, he's out of position.
Yeah.
With the chance to score, these, especially against Norwich and Burnley, this will suit him.
Yeah.
He'll be able to hit him on the counter.
Yeah, it might put some people off going to him now, and if you want to delay it because of those fixtures, I understand. But if you want to get him in immediately, I don't think I'd be put off by those fixtures. I think there's still the potential for points in those, like you say. Yeah, the only other thing, like I said, was the Chuba Akpom renaissance continues. I wouldn't be rushing to sell him, but I also wouldn't necessarily expect it to carry on. So that's worth bearing in mind there. The other team to cover in this is Bristol City, who obviously got the 1-1 draw, having taken the lead against Middlesbrough. Vyman was found well by Conway and finished it well. I don't really have a great deal to say on them. The attacking assets are still fine. I wouldn't be sort of rushing to own them. Other than them, it would be a stay away. They've got Watford this weekend, so I don't think you'd really be desperate to have them. I don't know if you have anything to add on Bristol City, Dan.
It seems like the fans are losing patience as well with Pearson. So I think he's got to get sacked at this point.
It's a tough one, but the mood doesn't seem sort of like positive.
The thing is, though, he never looks like he's bothered either. Like he's look like he really don't care if he's there or not half the time.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
you
I
called
obviously
it,
tipped
didn't you?
I obviously tipped them for to be potentially relegated. So part of that was choosing someone different, but there was reasoning, and it does seem to be playing out. So
Well, 3 points from the relegation zone now. They're 20th.
yeah, yeah. So it's that you can't even, like, before I was like, they're higher up the league, but they're not that many points ahead. Now they're not that many points ahead, and they're lower down the league. So potentially an issue for them. But yeah, so we'll move on to our next team, which is Birmingham. So obviously Birmingham, we sort of joked about how Birmingham would be sort of the team we wished we'd gone with this week, and they ended up with a 2-1 win over Stoke and a 2-2 draw with Swansea. So Dan, kick us off talking about Birmingham.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was. I've seen so many teams, but someone did go for Birmingham.
Yeah, I saw a few go for 2 or 3 go for Birmingham.
I think it was something like Ruddy, Trusty, and Hogan.
Yeah,
A lot of them were. Well, Hogan got a few goals. I, I think Birmingham are a lot better team than we definitely thought they were at the start, and we've
yes,
gradually been saying that. They're just really solid. They're together, and they're 10th now. They're only 3 points off the playoffs. I'm not saying they're going to get to the playoffs, but they're definitely well drilled, and they're definitely not as much of a basket case at this present time than we thought they were. They've done good recruitment especially with the loan signings. Hannibal, Trusty, probably missing Sanderson. Is he on loan? So they've definitely got options there. I think Hogan's now got 9 goals, which is joint top goal scorer. We've mentioned numerous times that Trusty's probably been one of the best centre backs in the league this year. I know you think Ruddy's had a really good season in
yeah.
goal, considering he hadn't played for years. Really, he's been back up. They're not the worst team to go with, and the next three, it's not terrible. They got Sunderland, Blackpool, and Reading. Like, you can see a couple of clean sheets. You could see Hogan scoring a couple of goals against those teams. So, like, I don't think they're the worst team to maybe punt on.
Yeah, I mean, I think they actually have quite a few sort of options in there. I think Ruddy has done very well. I didn't necessarily expect the most from him this season, but I think he's done well. Trusty, Sanderson, um, Hannibal's on some of the set pieces. I wouldn't necessarily be going for him, because I think there are probably better cheap midfielders in terms of being slightly further up the pitch, but it's not the worst. And then obviously Scott Hogan in amongst the goals. I'd probably primarily be looking at them defensively in terms of Gaffr assets still. But if you have someone like Scott Hogan, he's probably going to tick over, particularly as they're playing better than we thought they would.
It's a shame that they're not like a team who have like a rogue double.
Yeah,
Because it might be like quite fun to jump on a couple.
yeah.
I just can't see me going there.
No, I mean the biggest thing, like I say, particularly with one of the defensive assets, is if you have an extra sort of cheap defender, it potentially enables something elsewhere, but which would be the main thing. But
I wouldn't play him, Angus.
no, but
I'd look
that's
at
the
my
problem.
team.
I mean, we only have to look at the pod team. I
Yeah.
basically got us to include a Birmingham defender. We went with Collan. He's sat on the bench every time. He's racking up the points, but on our bench.
Yeah, I think because you're going to look at it and you're going to have, I don't know, Bree Jones, Amatovic, and you're like, well, they're 6.5. I'm not going
Yeah.
to play Birmingham, and then they'll keep a clean sheet. But
yeah, it's where
yeah,
I think potentially Ruddy might be the way to go if you want something from Birmingham, because that's going to be the easiest one to play, quite apart from anything else, is getting Ruddy in there. So he's probably where I'd go, but I do think they've got decent assets, and I think they're a decent team. I think that's, particularly in terms of looking at when you've got players against Birmingham, they're not the worst opposition, but they're not quite as sort of a good opponent to have as we would have thought even earlier in the season.
I wouldn't target Birmingham.
No,
I don't think.
So
we've got next few teams, Angus. We can probably fly through, to be honest.
Yeah, because we've covered some of their sort of opponents, and so we'll sort of go through three of them relatively quickly. We've got Swansea, Stoke, and Wigan. So obviously Swansea, they drew with Wigan and drew with Birmingham. Stoke lost to Birmingham and beat Luton, as we've mentioned. And Wigan, as mentioned, drew with Swansea and lost to Coventry. So I think with those, they're the sort of, the backup ones. Not necessarily many people had them. I saw a few on Swansea, particularly the likes of Bender, Manning, Pirro, who all got returns. And I think if you're looking at Swansea, it's going to be those three. I don't think you'd be looking at too many others from them. Stoke, Nick Powell's back. That's the big thing for them. Nick Powell's
the big thing is Harry Souttar is back for them.
Yes, I suppose.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
In actual football terms, the big thing is that Harry Souttar's back. In Gaffr terms, the big thing is that Nick Powell's back.
But like I said, and Jamie's mentioned this a few. He thinks Souttar's the best centre back in the league, and he's probably definitely top three. I'd say.
Yeah.
Was he 6'6"? And when you think he was up against Morris and Adebayo, with Cornick running channels, he done quite well considering he ain't played for about a year.
Yeah, and comfortable on the ball, which you don't often see from players at that tight as well. Which is the big thing that helps him. And I think it does help them defensively, particularly with sort of Timon starting to get involved again, and we still have doubts about sort of the setup and everything, but I do think it will help them having Souttar back, and obviously Baker returned, who some people might still have, but yeah, and then Wigan, Keane returned, McLean returned.
They're in trouble, Angus.
But they're sort of 23rd now.
23rd, yeah.
And yeah, it's not looking great for them. You can sort of see some elements of positivity there. but it's not enough really. You're putting a lot of stock in things like, Callum Lang being back and that helping them and things like that. It's going to have, he probably will help being back, but it's going to have to help them quite dramatically at this point.
Yeah.
Um,
They're a team to target, Wigan.
Yeah, I think so. Got a few more doublers now. Reading, who played Preston. They lost 2-1 to Preston on the Friday night to open the game week, and then obviously the 2-0 loss to Watford. Blackpool, who lost to Luton and Middlesbrough, and Rotherham, who lost to Norwich and beat Sheffield United. So Dan, do you have anything to give us on those three teams?
Reading have won one game in 8, and they've only picked up 4 points in that time. They played Luton probably about a week ago. Actually, I'm losing track of time. It was just a really bad game of football. It was 0-0, no quality really. Yeah, they could drop down the table. I don't know. Blackpool, I'm worried about. I know they've had a lot of injuries, but they're another one of these teams that are sliding down the table. But they looked quite decent going forward against Luton, but I'm not sure how long Jerry Yates is going to keep up his form. I don't know if you want to say anything about those two, Angus.
I think with Blackpool, I think they've been quite hard hit with absences over this period, particularly with illness adding to the injury issues they already had, particularly affecting players like Patino, who'd obviously been so important for them, which seem to be getting better now. Patino obviously getting over the illness. Anderson, I think, came back, although he might have picked up another injury, but I think just having a few more bodies for them could help mitigate the drop off of from the likes of Jerry Yates. But yeah, it's going to be a struggle for them. We knew it was going to be a struggle for them. It would just sort of remain to be seen. I think, like I say, a couple of bodies being back could help them. Yeah, I don't have much else to add. Anything on Rotherham or Norwich for that matter?
Rotherham, I think I've been quite harsh on them. You've got a whole table set up for them with their shots and all that. But one thing you can't question about Rotherham is their fight and commitment to play for Rotherham.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that the last few weeks. They've had Burnley, Norwich, and Sheffield United the last 3 games.
Yeah.
And although they've been battered in most of the games, they've competed, they've scored goals, and they did beat Sheffield United. They've got Luton away on Saturday, and then the break. Where you think they probably need the break, just to probably reset and for the new manager to get across his ideas. I don't know if you have anything about Rotherham.
Yeah, I think the other thing was key was that they were getting a couple of players back who've been missing. So the likes of Cameron Humphreys came back, Kyoso came back. They've been having to play Brooke Norton-Cuffy a lot, who's not used to playing sort of that amount of minutes, particularly at this level. Well, that amount of minutes, full stop. But then adding in that it's in the Championship, he's struggled. He's had cramping issues in multiple games. So I think just having another player in that position that sort of thing will be really helpful for them. It's also worth saying I brought up those stats about the 4 games where they'd sort of conceded all those chances and everything. And then they obviously had the Burnley game, the very dramatic Burnley game. But then in the double against Norwich and Sheffield United, by the numbers, those were their best 2 defensive performances in those 7 games that I've been keeping the sort of numbers for. With the Sheffield United one being the best one, I think. So it's just I'm not saying it's going to be suddenly fixed, but it's just quite funny that they had those 4 games where it's quite dramatic, and then the Burnley game where they conceded 3 and conceded an XG of over 3, and then, at least by the numbers, their 2 best defensive performances have come against Norwich and Sheffield United.
I wonder if that's part of the thing where they played like Hull, Coventry and Cardiff, and they probably view it as, we can get points from them, we can attack them, and then obviously they get done on the counter, whereas they've probably set up defensive against the other teams. And
yeah, I mean, it's worth saying, I'm talking about their best defensive performances. They've still given up over 10 shots in every game. Like, it's not like they're sort of, I think it was 1.75 XG against Norwich. So it's not like it's better, but it's not exactly like, amazing. So I think that would be the element of concern still. But, they have done better. And like I say, getting a couple of players back, or what is a light squad for them, for obvious reasons, means that every player they get back that they've been missing is probably more significant than for anyone else. So particularly someone like Humphreys, who we won't necessarily be thinking much about, given that they can't play Wood sort of twice in a week, having another centre-back in there makes a big difference. But yeah, I don't have much else to add on Rotherham. I think, we've probably given them more time than we anticipated. So we'll finish off on Cardiff, Huddersfield and Hull with the remaining 3 doublers. They played, in terms of single game week teams, they played Sunderland, Blackburn and Millwall. Do you have much to say on any of these teams, Dan?
I'm just going to say that Cardiff did have Robinson back from his suspension.
Yes.
That he did score, which is quite massive for them. Huddersfield, you've mentioned it, Ruffles wonder goal, but I'm still worried about Huddersfield. Like, I look at the team and he's playing a lot of youngsters.
I think he didn't have much of a choice, in fairness.
But that's what I mean. Having to play youngsters, which isn't ideal. They might be good youngsters. I do worry about them because I'm not convinced they're going to go and sign anyone in January either. So
no, I think it will be big for them. Some of the players that will return after the break. So obviously they've been without Andrew for a little while. He'll be back. They were without Lees. He'll be back. I think they'll be hoping to get Pearson back, although we'll see on that. There hasn't been much of a timeline on him throughout this period. But just sort of, getting a few of those sort of, like you say, they've been playing a lot of youngsters, so getting some of those sort of actual first team squad members back will make a difference to them. At least you'd like to think. And someone like Andrew, and we've spoken about him before, and I think they've probably missed him through this period, particularly while they've had to sort of include some of those young sort of youth team players almost. So I think the break probably comes at a good time for someone like them. In terms of Cardiff, I don't have a great deal to add. They got their win against Sunderland. Sunderland weren't great in that game. They then lost to Hull, which is kind of the thing with Cardiff. They beat Sunderland, keep a clean sheet, turn around, concede 3 to Hull. So I wouldn't be rushing for their assets.
some of these teams are just a nightmare.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that's going to we're going to have to sort of establish after the break with some of these teams, and it might take a little while. And the thing that is probably more relevant from these final games is the fact that they played Sunderland and Millwall, who obviously double in 21. The very long game week 21.
The longest game week ever.
Yeah. I don't think we'll talk about them now too much because I'm pretty sure they're going to come up in the questions that we'll get into. But obviously, my main takeaway from a Millwall point of view was about what Estupinian did to Charlie Cresswell's face. I don't know if
he didn't mean it though.
No, but if everyone's seen the pictures of Charlie Cresswell's face,
oh yeah,
I more mean from that point of view. And that was sort of almost my main takeaway from, and I suppose mention for Regan Slater getting 2 goals in the game, but you're not going to be buying someone like Regan Slater. So
someone has Regan Slater. Do you know who has Regan Slater?
No, I don't.
Buddy has him.
Oh, there we go. One person has Regan Slater. Might be the only person who has Regan Slater, but all credit
whether he
to
started in, I'm not sure.
Yes, I suppose that's the other issue. But yeah, so we will get into the questions that everyone has sent us on Twitter. As said every week, these are in no particular order. So Ski House 78 has said, I've had a nightmare picking captains and vice captains with generally going for home midfielders or forwards, not really working out. Can you do a stats heavy deep dive on distribution of captain and vice captain points in the season so far to see if there's a trend to help predict best the captains or vice captains, including teams to target? A task best suited to Jamie. So yeah, unfortunately, Jamie's not here. He obviously, as everyone knows, would have been the best person for this. No, I did see this afternoon, but didn't have a chance to sort of get into looking at any of this. It's tough. I think there are probably some I guess tips for your captains and vice captains. I don't hate the methodology you're using in terms of I wouldn't necessarily. The home games can help, but I wouldn't necessarily be focusing on sort of whether a team is home or away. It helps, but I think you've got to look at the opposition. We're talking about some of these teams. If you've got an attacking player against someone like Bristol City, Wigan, Hull have been one, Blackpool to a degree, Rotherham. Though it's almost like finding your oppositions as much as the players you've got. I mean, obviously, you're naturally going to gravitate more towards your players from the likes of Norwich and Burnley and Watford. But I think maybe looking at who they're playing and sort of those matchups rather than whether they're playing at home or away. I don't know if you've got anything else, Dan.
Well, you done. I just want to use an example. You done well earlier on in the season by taking a punt on Morris before. I think he scored 1 or 2, and then he hit that spell, and that was mainly because I think we had a couple of good games. One of them was Coventry when they were bad defensively. I know it can be frustrating not hitting captains and vice captains, but I'm quite enjoying it. The last couple of seasons, Tony, Mitrovic,
Armstrong,
it was too obvious. Pookie, it was too obvious. Whereas you only have to look at the scoring chance to see. I think there's probably about 7, 8, 10 players on 9 or 8 or 9 goals. Yeah. So I don't think we're going to get a crazy goal. You might get someone 2 or 3, maybe get 20, but you're not going to get 25, 30 this year.
I don't think so, no.
So maybe you then look at, well, who does well at
Yeah,
bonus, and then
and that's
maybe
the other
that's
thing I was
when
going to mention. Yeah, is like,
Chair or
yeah,
Brie or someone like that.
you almost just go for the, like, particularly if you feel like you're doing badly, maybe just go for that sort of quote unquote safer pick in terms of someone who sort of racks up the bonus, where there's almost a
Especially,
lower,
yeah,
like a higher floor. Um,
yeah. So I think I'm not sure. I might be making it up, but in previous seasons, I wouldn't have given Chair vice captain, but I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure I've captained him much, but I think I've probably put a vice captain on
yeah,
him a few times. Definitely, I've always, if I don't, I'll put him as emergency just because I know he's going to play.
yeah, he's going to play. He's going to get the bonus. It's that sort of thing. So hopefully that sort of helped. We haven't really answered the question, but hope that sort of helped you there. Rob Pick has said, could there be a more unattractive double game week than this one for game week 21? Struggling to find the motivation to even buy one Millwall defender and on the verge of rolling a transfer. So, yeah, game week 21. Just how unattractive is it to you?
Well, there's a few things that come into this. Obviously, the teams aren't great. Sunderland's point of view is it's not helped by Sims just coming back from injury and their best striker, Stewart, being out. Um, Millwall, you could go defensively, but do you want to waste a transfer on a defender? Um, and with it being such a long game week, like anything can happen in those 3 weeks, and you could potentially lose points from anyway. And although some of those options are good, like I think if you have them, then that's fine, isn't it? Like Clark is a reasonable option, but I'm not thrilled about bringing too many in. I think the maximum I'm going to have is two, and that would mean I'll have to take a -4. And
Yeah,
like Rob has said, it has. I have thought about just not doing anything and, and rolling it.
yeah. I think I certainly wouldn't be taking hits for anyone. Um, I think if you've got someone like Clark, great. I also think you've got to factor in that, yes, it's a double. It's a double with sort of, what, 4 weeks in between the games, something like
Yeah,
that. Um, I think that factors into it in terms of, for example, someone like Cresswell. Cresswell came back into the team because Sean Hutchinson got injured. Cresswell could play this game, and then Hutchinson could come back during the break, and he plays the game afterwards. And Cresswell was only a single game week player. It's that
it's
sort of
the
thing as
same.
well.
It's the same with Sims. Like Sims back fit now, but we don't know if how Mowbray's going to play because he hasn't had Sims and Stewart fit, so we don't know if he's going to play up both of them up front. So you can get Sims in, Stewart's fit, and he goes, well, Sims just bench and Stewart starts.
Yeah. So it's, you know they're hoping to have Stewart back for after the break. He's started back out training, so it wouldn't be sort of completely unreasonable from that regard. So yeah, that would sort of put me off. Um, so yeah, I guess it is the most unattractive one. FPL Frustration has asked, is it, I was going to ask about double game week 21 assets, but others have asked similar. Based on what we have seen so far this season, which goalkeeper, defender, mid and forward do you predict will end the season on the most Gaffr points? Keep up the good work, gents. So Dan, I'll throw this one to you first.
Goalie, I'm going to go for He's winning, but I'm going to go for Ruddy. I just think he's going to play every game. Birmingham have done quite well. Defender, it'll be Bree. Just because of the bonus. Similar to QPR, Chair will win that just for bonus, and he sort his talisman, so he's on a lot of set pieces. And striker, I'm going to go Pookie. I think Pookie will end up probably still doing quite well and probably being top goal scorer.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's. I mean, the goalkeeper could go any sort of number of ways. So I struggle a little bit with that one. I'm going to say Horvath. I'm going to say Bree for the defender, Chair for the midfielder, and I'm going to say Joao Pedro for the forward. It's nothing too sort of extravagant there, nothing sort of, really wild. So the next question we've got is from Billy Hadaway, who said, Cresswell and Clark or Cooper and Embleton for double game week 21?
Ooh. I don't like either. The main thing is because what you mentioned. I think Clark is the best option from Sunderland, but with Cresswell might not play the second game, and Embleton's not been playing every game for Sunderland either, so I don't really like either.
Yeah, I mean, if you could have had another defender plus Clark, I would have said that, but
yeah,
Cresswell feels like the obvious one where he could just not play the second one. I guess because that one has Clark, I'll say Cresswell and Clark, because Clark is the one that of those that I would want to include the most. But Ron Mukherjee has asked us a question. He said he has two questions. So the best Gaffr options for double game week 21, if any. And he says, also, will you guys be covering a Gaffr World Cup fantasy through pods and spaces? Thanks for all the great pods. So in terms of the best assets for game week 21, Jack Clark, Fleming.
Maybe, maybe Long for Millwall if you're playing Jeepers Keepers.
Potentially someone like Scott Malone. But yeah, it's not great. And the World Cup fantasy. So obviously, people will have seen the tweets go out with the polls, and if you haven't, please go vote on them.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting Mexico or Japan.
So we have
Morocco.
We had to. Well, we've sort of given the community the option to vote for a country that we have to have a triple up from in the game. So we will be playing the Gaffr game. We'll be podding about the World Cup, or throughout when we can. We'll certainly look to do it sort of between the rounds. So we will be podding about it. We will. When we pod about it, we'll be podding about the Gaffr game, which is obviously the one you've asked about. We'll do a pod probably late this week where we'll sort of talk about what we're going to do content wise, but we will be podding about it, yes. And like I say, do go.
We're not experts anyway.
This is not to sort of be experts about it. This is not necessarily to try and win, otherwise we wouldn't have let you guys pick a triple up for us. If you guys remember the pods me and Jamie did during the Euros, it will be a similar vibe to that. We will be covering the games, but we won't be taking it too seriously. So yeah, that's that. Petri Annanen has asked us, captain and vice captain this week, and he said, any reason to skip Sunderland and Millwall and captaincy choices? I think if you don't have any of them, I wouldn't be rushing to bring them in to captain them this week, to be honest. We've just seen this game week, actually, quite a bit of sort of double game week players being outscored by single game week players, and double game weeks don't necessarily mean points and that sort of thing. So I know it's something we've covered before in terms of saying, like, you can be distracted from sort of good single games by teams with a double. For those people who play FPL, think about the Watford doubles last season. So I think someone like Clark or Fleming is fine. They're the only ones I would look to put an armband on, even if you have one from them. If you had someone like a Sirkin, for example. I know a few people have Sirkin. I'm not sure I'd be looking to put an armband on him over someone like, Sarr or Pedro against Bristol City, or maybe someone like Ndiaye against Cardiff, or I'm just trying to think about any other teams.
It's weird because I hardly have any players apart from 3 teams, so I need to check the fixtures.
Yeah, and so it's just sort of like, sort of thinking, if people wanted a punt, for example, particularly if they're planning ahead, someone like a West Brom player, if you've got someone like John Swift against Stoke, I don't think that's the worst game, particularly with them sort of looking a bit better. And potentially someone like, we've mentioned him, particularly for the armband, someone like James Bree at home against Rotherham.
I feel very uneasy at the minute about talking about Luton.
Yeah, well, we'll have a whole sort of conversation, I'm sure, about Nathan Jones. Barry Johnson has just asked, how did 15 people beat my score of 228?
Welcome to Gaffr.
You're probably a bit unfortunate that many people beat it, but there were some amazing scores about this week. Lee B has asked us, what are you going to say?
Was this
Sorry?
the highest ever? Was this the highest scoring week ever? Was it higher than the Tony Goldfest?
Yeah, I was
one?
about to say. I mean, I remember a captaincy, a 70-odd point captaincy on Ivan Toney. So I don't know. Is the honest answer to that. Lee B has asked us, though, are Middlesbrough assets back on the table now? So what are the best remaining game weeks to play Jeepers Keepers? 23 or 28, assuming most have more from Coventry. Well, I hope you mean Wilson from Coventry.
Yeah.
I don't think it really makes much of a difference which one of those you play Jeepers Keepers in. Particularly if you've got nothing else left to play. Like, for example, if you still have something like triple and you want to play that in one of the smaller doubles, that might affect which one you play Jeepers Keepers in. But if it's just purely you've only got Jeepers Keepers, I don't think it makes too much of a difference. You just sort of you see what's easier. If you have things to fix and you can't buy the goalkeeper for 23, then you've got 28. If you want to go in 23, go in 23. That's not a problem. The other question, Middlesbrough assets. Dan, what do you think of Middlesbrough assets? Are they back?
I don't know. The fixtures aren't great, are they? I think Jones. I've done that all night. I think Jones is fine, whatever fixture. I think.
Yeah. And like I said, Chuba Akpom I think is fine, but I wouldn't back him to sort of keep scoring.
I'm disappointed that this was Watmore's time to shine, and he's just not playing.
That feels perfect for Duncan Watmore. Joe Amra Batman has said, for Angus, do you want my transfer plans on Thursday or Friday? As I said, I was the first one to lock in the same team that everyone had. So I think that logically shows that everyone else copied me. So
What I would say is, I think if we listen back to the pods, I was on Watford, QPR, and Sheffield United about 2 weeks before anyone else was on them.
yeah, but I had the final team before anyone else, so everyone else is
Well, that's
copying
because
me.
you have the team news.
I also just
So
went early
obviously,
because I wanted to see how my team looked. I went the night before I even did the team news because I wanted to see how my team looked and everything. So, but in terms of your transfer plans on Thursday or Friday, let's go Friday. Let's leave it late. Let's have some fun with it. FPLB has asked us best Sunderland options for game week 21.
it's
Clark,
just Clark for me.
maybe Ahmad, but I don't think you can guarantee that he's going to start, particularly if Stewart might be available for the second game. And Sirkin, just as a solid option in there. Maybe Patterson, actually. But
I
that's going to...
just don't think they're good enough defensively.
No, although Patterson didn't he save a penalty, so you've got that potential in there.
Well, every goalie's got the potential of saving a bit. I could be in goal and I could save a penalty.
Yeah, but he's done it. He just did it. We remember him doing it. So he's immediately better. Shedebe has asked us, are Millwall assets avoidable given their bad away form? So yes, this is the thing I think we've mentioned before with Millwall and their home forms. Obviously, the opposite applies in terms of the away form not being as good. Like I say, I think, and again, this is partially, as I've spoken before, about the guys who get bonus, unless you're going someone like Fleming or Malone. I think they are avoidable. I wouldn't necessarily say if you have someone already, I wouldn't necessarily say, oh, you must sell them. But I think that difference in terms of the players who get the bonus is the one thing for me. I don't know if you've got anything else on the Millwall sort of assets, Dan.
No, pretty much Fleming, really.
Yeah. FPL Forest has asked us, any particular reason
You've
why...
missed Angus. Angus, you missed. We found out his name.
Oh, yes, Joe.
Joe. I know Jamie was very happy about that.
Yes. So FPL Forest has asked us, any particular reason why Morris, Chair, or Sarr had a combined 0 goals and assists between them when I decided to use the triple on them, asking for a mate? So they were popular this week.
That's bad. That's so unfortunate.
Yeah. I don't know what to say to you there. As someone who on the follow the leader, Captain Sarr and Vice Captain Chair, and would have had Morris if it hadn't been for the yellow card issue, I don't really know what to say. You've got very, very unlucky there. So yeah, the last question goes to FPL Ghost, who asks us about Cancelo. So we'll leave that one out. So yeah, so that's everything. That's all the questions. We will be back on Sunday. Because of when this pod will be released, I don't think we'll be doing the spaces.
No.
So we'll be back on Sunday. Depending on
I'm not sure I could cope with an hour of asking which Mill or Sunderland player I can get.
Yeah, I feel like that would be a lot of the spaces, and I've already spent more time talking about those two teams than I'm comfortable with. So we'll be back on Sunday. We'll do, depending on the particular timings, we'll have something for you on game week, the majority of game week 21, and we'll have something for you on the World Cup game. Like I say, just to sort of do a brief sort of early look at it, what we're going to be doing content-wise, etc. But we'll let you know in due course sort of what we're going to be doing and when with those two. So thank you for listening, and goodbye.
Goodbye.